with a child, or, in my case, I have 6 sons, but I've watched each one of them. All they want in that 6 years, they want to be happy, have fun, and learn new things and be loved.
Yeah.
Pretty much it. But one day I'm thinking about it, and I thought, what what happens if something negative happens to that child? Some are abandoned, or they lose their parents. They grow up in orphanages and foster homes, not knowing where they're going to live next.
Right.
Some are verbally abused. Some are physically abused. Some grow up with a parent with an alcoholic or a drug abuser. There's all kinds of things that happen to children. And I thought, well, what do they do with that? Because they just want to be happy, really build and
Right.
thrive and doing really well. It's so gratifying when people can just let go of that stuff. And I've helped a couple hundred women get out of abusive relationships. And from my point of view, it's so simple. From their point of view, they're in it. It's hard. It's hard to get out because you only see, I need to escape. But that's not what you need to do. You need to let go of what caused you to get into that relationship in the first place. Escaping is another one later on if you haven't dealt with it. So, there's real power. I have a program called The Power of Letting Go. And I named it that because your real
Say I'm
power is
ready for
in
the
letting
next
go.
one now. So,
Yeah.
bravo to you, sir. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience that maybe I didn't ask that is part of your passion or what you're doing in life?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you a story about how to create passion.
I'd like to hear it.
And this happened about shortly after I learned about this power of letting go, probably close.
Alrighty, we are live. Welcome to the Dr. Smiley Show. I was about to say the Captain Smiley Show. I don't know what evoked me to do that. Maybe it's a cayenne pepper. Got me an upper rank. So, Jim, really good to see you. Your beautiful smile.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Jim Britt, I'm not going to go over a bio. I'm just going to say why you're here. You're here because I have a lot of people I know and I've met and I've seen people that have just a great heart, great integrity, great content, and a great magnetism for pulling the best people and the best in humanity together. And so I wanted to honor you today. And you'll be in a book called Dr. Smiley Show. So if you'd be so kind as to share what you would like to share about how Jim became Jim Britt.
Well, I think it started with my mom. Uh, she named me, and she told me that I was one of a kind, that I was the only one. So, but now I find that there's a lot of gems out there. So
Why do you think
that's
that
where
is?
it started.
Do you think it's that when moms see a great child, they say, well, we got to put Jim on this kid's name?
I guess, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, but we grew up pretty poor. I look back, it's kind of amazing to me that I do what I do today, actually. Um, but we grew up, we didn't have electricity until I was about 6. And I didn't know we didn't have electricity because we never had it. And we lived down in the backwoods of Oklahoma, and not too many people lived down there, so they just never run power lines in there. So, and then we started moving around, and I never went to one school for a full year until the ninth grade.
Why
And
was that?
and then 10th grade, I dropped out about halfway through the 10th grade. So, and if I had to do over, I'd probably drop out in the 8th grade.
Why did
And
you
that would
move
be
so
it.
much? Why'd you move so much, Jim?
I never really knew for sure, but it was either we couldn't pay the rent, or I don't know. My dad was just always, let's move. We'd go to a different town, not someplace within that town. We'd just go to different cities. And even the one town we lived in for a full year, we stayed there after I dropped out of school for a while, another few years. But we lived in, I think, 4 or 5 places within that little town, a very small town. And so we were just always moving. And then my dad would buy a house. If it had grass, he'd take it out. If it didn't, he would plant it. If it had a tree, you cut it down. If it didn't have trees, he planted them. So
Why
it
was
was,
that?
and he,
Why would he
I
do
don't
that?
know. I mean, and he was a master salesperson, I would say. He never thought he could sell, but he would go to these community swap meets, little tiny places there in Oklahoma, and he was amazing. he would negotiate buying a whatever electric motor or something. What do you want for that? $5? No, no, no. And finally, back and forth, he'd get it for $2. Then he'd take the motor down at the end of the auction and have it auctioned off for $6. He was just, but he struggled. He struggled. He got hurt when he was a young man and was on kind of a partial disability. He could still work and still get around. But we survived on about $150 or so a month, plus whatever he could earn on the side, doing little odd things, fixing up lawnmowers and what have you. So I learned a lot from that, watching him do that. So anyway, when I dropped out of high school, I got married at 18 years old, and then I pumped gas for a while. Had my first child about a little over a year later. Pumped gas for a couple of years. Then I went to work at my dream job in the factory, working on the assembly line. Found out that wasn't really my dream job. And then somebody introduced me to a direct sales company, and I didn't know how to sell anything. And I said, well, it cost me $4,000 to join, and I had $9. So I went to 23 banks and loan companies, and the last one on my list finally loaned it to me. I was a loan shark of some kind. And they said, if you talk a lot, you'll earn a lot. And I said, well, how much is a lot? And he said, you got to talk to 10 people a day if you want to make any money. I said, okay. So I went and quit my job at the factory, started talking to 10 people every day. We didn't have internet. This is way back before that. And I had to physically go find 10 people a day. And I did that for a year. So at the end of the year, I talked to 3,650 people minimum. I made one sale that was about a $25 sale. In addition to that, I sold my boat, my camper, my pickup, my fishing equipment, my guns to survive, basically. But at the end of that year, I'm standing in my kitchen, never forget, looking out the window. Both of my vehicles had been repoed. My home had been foreclosed. I had 5 days from living on the street. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I got a wife and a child, and I reach in my pocket. I thought, I don't even have a way to get there. I have a car. And I don't know what came over me, but I said, no, I'm not going to quit.
Jim,
And
Jim,
why I said that? Yeah.
we have a little bit of interruption. Can you start with I reached in my pocket, please? We had an interruption on the signal.
Okay. So I reached in my pocket and I had 15 cents. That was it. And I had a wife and a child, no food in the house, no place to go from there. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And thought about going back to the factory. And I thought, no, I'm not going back. Then whatever came over me, I said, I'm not going to quit. They told me I could get rich at this company. That's what I'm going to do. I had no idea. It was such a looking back. I'm thinking, were you stupid or what? I mean, how could anybody do that in that position? About 2 years later, or 2 hours later, I get a knock on the door, and it's somebody from the direct sales company, one of the executives. He said, I tried to call you, but your phone's disconnected. He said, I hear you're a hard worker, but you're not making any money. Can we talk? And we sat actually in my floor because I didn't have a sofa. And he shared with me what I was doing wrong, what I needed to be doing, and my business. In the next 6 months, that business earned me over $500,000.
What did he say?
I'm sorry, over the next 12 months, not the 6 months. Over the next 12 months, it earned me $500,000.
What did he say to you?
Well, he said, tell me what you're doing. And I told him, and he said, okay. He said, that's not working. I said, yeah, I get it. And he says, you got to arrive at 3 destinations before you have a prospect. I said, what are those? He said, well, number one, do they have a pain or a problem? If they don't, you don't have a prospect. Number two, do they want to solve it? Because some people don't. He said, and number three, then you got a prospect. I said, well, how would I know
What
they
was
got a
number
pain
what
or
was
a
number
problem?
three again? I'm sorry.
He said, you ask questions.
You ask questions, okay?
And number three,
Yeah.
yeah. Number three was do they want to solve it? No, actually, number one is do they have a pain or a problem? Do they want to solve it? And can you solve it? Is number three.
Great.
And so I said, well, how would I know if they have a pain or a problem? He said, you ask questions and listen. I said, well, what kind of questions? And he said, it doesn't matter. I said, what do you mean it doesn't matter? He said, yeah. He said, if you're at church, you just say, and you meet somebody new, say, do you come here every Sunday? Or if you're in a coffee shop, do you come here and have coffee every morning? Or if you're, at a barbecue or family reunion, whatever it is, he said, you ask questions and you listen. He said, it doesn't matter the question. Let one question lead to the next, and pretty soon they'll share their pain and their problem with you if they trust you. So ask questions and listen. Stop jacking your jaws out there and, talking too much. Just listen and they'll tell you their pain, which is so true. And so I applied that. I mean, it started the next day. Heat, carrying a 5-gallon container of carpet shampoo to the one sale that I'd made about 6 months earlier, hoping they were going to buy it. And that walking that 3 miles, they did buy it. It was about another $25 for me. And they offered me another opportunity that over the next 12 months earned me just over $500,000. So I went from 15 cents in my pocket to a millionaire in 1 year. And it all happened in one day.
Mm.
I mean, literally, when I said, no, I'm not going to give up, it was like boom, boom, boom. It's like time, fate, circumstances, whatever you want to call it, all showed up at the same time and says, Jim's not going to quit. Let's give it to him. So
What
that's
did
how I got
you end
started.
up
But what
selling?
really came out of that direct sales company, Ken, is they closed down a couple of years after that. But Jim Rohn was the trainer in that company.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's where I met Jim. And later we ended up in business together after they closed down. I started promoting Jim, and that just grew from one thing to the next. And pretty soon I'm on stage speaking, and 45 years later, here I am still doing it.
And what was the opportunity you got to sell instead of soap?
Uh, oh, the other opportunity. Well, it was the number one builder in Oklahoma City. And I worked for him during the summer, picking up around construction sites where he's building apartments and some major custom homes. And during the ninth grade in high school, we built a home in shop class. Actually, went out on site, built a home, and so I knew all of the trades. And so when I was cleaning up, I would always carry a tape measure and a hammer, and I would measure doors and make sure they're the right width. And I'd find mistakes that carpenters made, and I would correct them. And then I'd tell him that I made the correction. And and he knew I'd gone through that class in the ninth grade as well. So he and his brother, when I went in to sell that 5 gallons of carpet shampoo to him, um, they said, "Can you come in and chat with us for a minute?" So I go in his office and he said, "We've been talking a lot about you. We like you. We trust you. We think you're pretty smart." He said, "You've saved me a lot of money over the years just as a cleanup person, but the things you found wrong," he says, "pretty amazing." He said, "We'd like to do a deal with you." I said, "What kind of deal?" He said, "We want to build an apartment complex together." I said, "Man, I don't really have money to invest." I mean, I had no money except what the check I just picked up from him. And he said, "No, no, we're going to invest in you. We want to try something new." He said, "We've got a 52 units of apartments that we want to build." And he said, "We'd like for you to build it." And I said, "What do you mean?" I mean, he said, "We want you to run the whole deal and build the place." And he said, "It usually takes about 14 months, 12 to 14 months to build this." He said, "Probably 14 would be more accurate." He said, "If you finish in 12 months," he said, "you'll earn a $60,000 bonus." And he said, "And in addition to that, we're going to pay you $300 a week. We're going to furnish you with a car and a 3-bedroom furnished apartment, which is everything I needed right there." And he said, "Now you got 12 months to build it," but he said, "For every day that you go over that, if you go to 14 months, no bonus. He said, every day you earn it or you lose $1,000. He said, but big incentive, which is not likely that you would do this, but if you, every day that you finish earlier than 12 months, you earn 1,000 a day. Long story short, I built that in 8 months. And, and the way I did it was they give me the plans and they give me a list of contractors. So I'm looking at the plans. I'm going, there's 8 buildings on this project, and there are only one framing contractor and one cement finisher and one electrician. I thought, I'm going to hire one for each building. So this thing went up like crazy.
Yeah.
So they couldn't believe it when I said, "Okay, I'm done. Come out and inspect." All the carpet had to be in and all of that. So, um, so anyway, it and that went into a business that lasted for on the side for quite a while. We built apartments, we built warehouses, and a lot of other things. In addition to that. Um, so anyway, it just taught me a valuable lesson. And if you don't give up, if you've got something you think is going to work and you want it to work and you're passionate about it, keep doing it, man, whatever it takes. I could have quit. In fact, I thought about quitting. I thought about quitting when I was carrying that 5 gallons of carpet shampoo to him through the Oklahoma heat. I'd sit down a couple of times. I broke down and just cried because I thought, what am I doing? This is just stupid. What if they don't even buy it? And I think my family needs food, and I pick it up and go again. And that's kind of the way I am now. I just I just keep moving forward, and I think so many people let little things stop them,
Mm-hmm.
and they stop. I always kind of look at it like a plane taking off. They stop just as it starts to lift off the runway. They give up, and let it lift off, man. Yeah, it's scary, but it's worth it.
You remind me of Sharon Lecter and Dr. Greg Reed's book, 3 Feet from Gold. How close we get sometimes before we give up.
Yeah,
And
true.
I'll
Very
tell you,
true.
my best times ever were the times when I had the highest adversity. I just said, I'm going to keep going. And just like you, were you close to your mom and dad?
Oh, very close. We had a very, very loving family. My parents were not abusive. They weren't alcoholics. They were just simple people. And I never heard my mom say one bad word about anybody ever. And my older sister was the same way. She just didn't have it in her to criticize somebody, even somebody that had hurt her. She just didn't have it in her to be critical. And my dad was pretty much the same way. He kind of jokingly tell, that guy's stupid or something like that. But he was very simple too. My mom had a fourth grade education. My dad had a second grade. Um, so, they weren't highly educated. My mom never worked except at home, which was hard work probably with four kids. Um, but yeah, we were very close. The whole family was very close, very loving, caring. You know, Nobody was high achievers. I was the one that kind of stepped out and did something a little different. So,
Well, I think that the valuable lessons they taught you is what makes you who you are. They taught you to care, they taught you the work ethic, and they taught you character.
I watched my mom one night. Sometimes we would not have enough food to go around. And so she would split it up amongst the six of us. And we had just sat down at the table and we ate a lot of beans and a lot of potatoes, fried potatoes, cornbread. Sometimes we'd have a meal of cornbread and milk, and that was it.
Mhm.
Um, so we sat down at the table, and there was a knock at the door just before she split the food up. And she goes to the door, and it was a homeless person. Back then, we called him a hobo. So the guy's begging for food. My
Right.
mama opened the door, come on in, pulls up another chair, sits down at the table. She starts splitting up the food amongst seven of us now. And I always noticed she took the least amount. But as she's splitting it up, I'm about maybe 10 years old. I'm going, who is this guy taking my food?
Right.
But I look back on that, and that's just the way she was. If you were out in the middle of a blizzard and she had a coat and you didn't, she'd give it to you. It's just the way she was.
Yeah, but
Yeah, great.
that rubs off on you, Jim. I'm telling you that you're that guy that I know. I don't know you as well as I would love to know you, but you seem like that guy that just always wants to give someone a chance.
Yeah, I think everybody deserves a chance, and I think they've got a lot more talent than most people think they have. And it just sometimes it takes just a little bit of coaxing somebody to move in one direction or getting them to let go of some shortcoming they think they have. The biggest problem I found over the years, and I discovered about 35 years ago, is we all develop within the first 6 years of our life a core belief that we don't know we have, a core belief about ourselves. And it's it's interesting how it gets developed because the first 6 years of life, as you know, with a child, or in my case, I have 6 sons, but I've watched each one of them. All they want in that 6 years, they want to be happy, have fun, and learn new things, and be loved.
Yeah,
Pretty much it. But one day I'm thinking about it, and I thought, what what happens if something negative happens to that child? Some are abandoned, or they lose their parents. They grow up in orphanages and foster homes, not knowing where they're going to live next.
right.
Some are verbally abused. Some are physically abused. Some grow up with a parent with an alcoholic or a drug abuser. There's all kinds of things that happen to children. And I thought, well, what do they do with that? Because they just want to be happy.
Right.
And the more I thought about it, I thought they learn to suppress it so they can get back to being happy as fast as they can.
Hmm.
But then the more I looked at it, I thought, well, every time they suppress it, they're less happy. And if it's something that's ongoing, they become less and less happy every time they experience that and suppress it. And they don't know they're suppressing. And I thought, well, we all develop that core belief during that first 6 years. You find somebody that, let's say they didn't get the love and attention they felt like they deserved, growing up. Um, they may end up as a victim in an abusive relationship because they're desperately seeking love and attention. Or they may take it out on themselves by overeating or over drinking, or a series of relationships short term because they don't feel like they're worthy of being loved. Uh, it just, it shows up in so many different ways. And you see it in school. You see kids starting to act out, do different things. They join up in different groups. The bullies hang out together. The popular person hangs out, got a group around him because he or she needs attention all the time. The jocks start hanging out together. The silent one's over in the corner because she's afraid to approach anybody and even talk, because she'll get rejected. So, but we don't notice that. We just think that kids are different, and they are different based upon how they were raised and what happens during that first 6 years. So that really changed my approach to working with people. And I thought, I've got to figure out how to help somebody discover what that core belief is and what keeps it alive.
Hmm.
Because when you look at the good things that's happened in your life, what keeps those alive in your memory and being able to reminisce about them is the emotional experience you had when it happened.
Right.
So when I looked at that, I thought, well, what keeps a negative one alive is the emotional experience you had when it happened.
Right.
So I had to figure out. Took me about a year and a half to figure out how to do it and to do it and get proficient at it, of how to help somebody discover their core belief and take the emotional attachment off of it, so that they can make free decisions and move ahead with greater ease.
Well, I'd like to dive into that in a second, but you brought up that you had no electricity, but you didn't know you didn't have any electricity because there wasn't any electricity to be had. And so I think to that point, if you're a child and you're mistreated and you don't know what it is to be treated right, you kind of get that identity that you're not worth it, or you're not valuable, or you're not loved. And so, as you said, it's a real ding on your personality. And so you quench wanting to know how you can deserve it, or you blame yourself for stuff. And
Sure.
I was at the store today because I had a little bit of a tinge in my throat, and it's amazing. You got a good health plan, and the prescriptions for three things was $3. And it asked me, would you like to round up? Well, there's nothing to round up. You have to round up a whole dollar to go to the next. But I have a rule, Jim. My rule is life is good, and someone else may not have a good life. If I round up, maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't, but at least I'm doing something to round up. And I think that
Sure.
that speaks to all these kids that have that gap of what they could have had or what they should have had. And what a mess when it's not dealt with. Would you mind digging in and sharing how you identify that core and that belief system?
I was good. I started in my speaking 45 years ago. I started coaching people about 40 years ago, and I was really good at asking questions and listening. But when I discovered this, I thought, I've got to figure out a way to really get to that core belief because I'd never done it before. I just get into stuff and get to a certain level, but not to the core. So I thought, I've got to get better at listening to the meaning behind what they're saying, not just what they say, so that I can ask a deeper question.
Hmm.
And that didn't take me very long to figure that one out. And I started getting to people's core belief, but I still didn't know how to take the emotional attachment off of it. And that took me probably another few months to just figure that out. And but sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it's pretty complex. Um, on a simple level, I'll give you an example. I had a woman in one of my classes not too long back, and we were talking about financial success as one of the topics. And she spoke up and she said, I can never be successful financially. And I said, well, why not? I guess she's probably 45, 50 years old. She said, because of my father. And I said, well, what about your father? She said, well, he verbally abused me from as long as I can remember, back even 2 years old. He pushed me around, told me he didn't love me. You'll never amount to anything, all the way through until I left home at 18 years old. He would say, you're never measure up to your siblings. You're worthless. You're this, you're that. She said, I never knew why he did that, but he just drilled into me that I would never be successful at anything. And I said, so your father's a reason you can't be successful? She said, yes. I said, so where's your father now? She said, well, he died 10 years ago. And I said, well, who's abusing you now? And she said, I don't understand. I don't understand the question. I said, well, your father's not here. So who's abusing you now and keeping you from attaining what you want to attain? I still don't understand the question. I said, well, you think about it for a little bit. 15 minutes or so, I came back and I said, did you come up with the answer? No. Second time I come back, no, didn't come up with the answer. Third time, she says, you mean I'm abusing me? I said, I don't know. What do you think? She said, I don't know. I said, keep thinking about it. Fourth time back, I didn't get within 10 feet from her. And she said, oh my God. She said, I'm abusing me. I'm carrying on his legacy. She said, oh my God. She said, and you could see her face. She had so much pain in her face, and it just lifted. And she dropped 10, 15 years off of her face right there. And then I worked with her just a little bit, having her do some deep breathing and, where'd you feel the feeling? And sometimes it was in her stomach, and they keep moving up and keep moving up. And pretty soon it's in her throat. And all of a sudden she's like, man, I'm tingling from head to toe.
Hmm.
And I said, well, how do you really feel? She said, I feel good. I feel really good to discover that. Oh my God. And I said, okay, well, let's let go of the good feeling. She said, oh no, I don't want to do that. And I said, do you trust me? She said, absolutely. I said, then I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take a deep breath. And when you breathe out, just breathe out that good feeling to everybody here in the audience. And she did. And she gets a standing ovation from everybody. And I checked in with her later on. Uh, this has probably been close to a year ago, and she's already got a business of her own. Is starting to really build and thrive and doing really well. I mean, it's so gratifying when people can just let go of that stuff. And I've helped a couple hundred women get out of abusive relationships, and from my point of view, it's so simple. From their point of view, they're in it. It's hard. It's hard to get out because you only see, I need to escape. But that's not what you need to do. You need to let go of what caused you to get into that relationship in the first place. Escaping is another one later on if you haven't dealt with it. So, there's real power. I have a program called The Power of Letting Go. And I named it that because your real power is in letting go of the things that disempower you.
That's very interesting, Jim. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford, and whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And it's the programming of proving that if you say you're not successful, you're going to prove you're not successful, so you can actually have your belief system continue to working on you.
Mhm. Well, you know that 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
You've heard of that? Well, what's wrong with the 80%? It's the programming they got within the first 6 years of life. And you see them, they everybody is self-aware. You know, you can be aware that you're 50 pounds overweight or you're struggling financially or your relationship's not working. Self-awareness is simple, easy, but you got to take it a step further than self-awareness. Because and it really proves to me that people want to change because they address the problem. It's just that they don't follow through. They
Hmm.
make a decision, but it's not a real decision. If a real decision was a whole circle, they leave a little opening in the top someplace, and that's their escape route. But if you want something bad enough, you close that up, and you got to want it bad enough that nothing less than that will do. Whatever it is you want to accomplish, it's something simple or something a major, doesn't matter.
So, how did you find out you were going to be a speaker? What brought you to the speaking stage?
Well, I worked with Jim Rohn, and my job was promoting him initially, and I guess I did such a good job that we were doing tons of business. We were doing a couple $1 million a month just in California way back then in the late '70s, and it just kind of forced me into speaking. I started out doing presentations for small offices with 20 people in it, and then I graduated in doing real estate boards and insurance agencies and various things. And pretty soon I'm out there doing events, and it just phased. I just phased into it. I never really aspired to be a speaker. Um, and looking back, I'm going, wow, amazing. I've had about 2 million people go through my events.
Hmm.
And I mean, amazes to me, amazing to me. It really is, because I never thought I would even be speaking, let alone having that many people attend my events. And I do all kinds of events. I do 3-day retreats with maybe 30 people in it, and I might do a convention center with 10,000 people in it. As a 2-hour keynote or something, and everything in between. I produce some of my own events. Sometimes I do events for organizations, and so I don't know. It just happened. I guess I was supposed to do this. I mean, when I figured this out um, about this core belief that we develop, I was actually sitting out by the pool one day, um, and this whole 80-20 rule kind of popped in my head, and I thought, well, what's wrong with the 80%? And that kind of what triggered the whole thing. Why I was given the gift of being alone that day. My wife was traveling. I thought I'm just going to hang out by the pool and do nothing, and that lasted about 15 minutes, and it was a life-changing day. So you never know where it's going to come from.
Well, I'd heard about you for a long time, and even though I got into into the space industry rather late, it was around 2009. My mom passed, and about 6 years later, I said I got to fly bigger, and so I went national. But I looked you up, and I saw all the great things you're doing, all the people you were connected to, and I got to meet you at the Women Economic Forum in LA. Mamie was there, Mark Uzak was there, and when I saw Mark
Yeah,
Uzak and you as buds, I said, this is a cool industry that you got friends that you bump into here and there, and it's kind of family. It's really fun.
it is. If you look at my website, all the great people that have endorsed me, I've gotten to know them. I like to associate with people that's doing great things, whether it's Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank or Jim Rohn or Dr. Dennis Waitley, and a lot of different people I've come to know over the years. It's just it's great to have people that you either aspire to be like, or you are like, or you're just friends to hang out together. And sometimes you can help them, sometimes they help you.
What's your website?
JimBritt.com.
How'd you come up with that? It must have been hard.
My mom came up with that website when I was born.
So I do owe you an explanation. I said that I was going to switch my name to Jim, but my name is James. It's my middle name though.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
And
When I was with Jim Rohn, we were Jim Rohn, Jim Britt, James Lutz, and James Healy. That's 4 top people in the company. We're
Really?
all Jims. Yeah,
Well, it's a good name.
yeah.
Jimmy Owens is one of our clients right now. I love him. He's a great guy. Jim's just, I don't know. They're just good people. Why is that? I guess that's the
I
book.
don't know. It's just an easy word to say, I guess, Jim. I don't know.
Jim Lutz likes to kid that his name is Jim. He likes to go to the gym. So
Yeah.
you have a wonderful website showing all these amazing relationships and people. But what I love about you, Jim, is that you take those beautiful relationships and you give all that relationship knowledge and wisdom in your mastermind. I never want to miss your mastermind the last Friday of the month. I mean, I'll tell you that I don't like 12 o'clock, but I like 12 o'clock on the last Friday of the month. That is such a
Yeah,
wonderful.
we have some great people. I mean, we've had some guests on there that, like Brian Tracy and Mark Victor Hansen and Les Brown and just a lot of incredible people. Mari Smith, a lot of great people that's accomplished some great things. And their whole objective is to help our co-authors in that book series that are part of the mastermind to extend their market reach and you know gain more traction in their business. That's some of the volumes right there. Yeah.
And I have 14 of them, but I have 5 handy ones. I guess I bought them in sets. So this was a set I was able to come across. But what a valuable amount of information. But more importantly, the people that give that information, those are solid people. One of my favorite
Yeah,
days, Jim,
absolutely.
I called you, I guess a couple years ago. I said, Jim, I love what you've been doing all these years I've been watching you. And I'd just like to thank you for what you do. And I'd like to put you on the Jumbotrons because I have access to them. You said, go ahead. And so I did. And I was just so happy that I was able to jump in your tribe. It was really a beautiful tribe. I wanted to share with the audience that you can't bump virtually a person in your tribe and not have a great conversation. But may I show just 2 books that were kind of from your tribe? These are 2.
Sure.
This is Ophir and this is Beth. And I just want to say
Oh
that
yeah.
you talk to people in your tribe, they mimic how much a heart-centered person speaks and what a heart-centered person wants in life, which is to make a difference. And I love the fact that they have faith they can do it. Because if you don't have faith, you quit. And if you have faith or hope, you do it. So I've just enjoyed immensely.
Beth was our first. Beth was our first
Right.
person, first co-author in our book series.
Yes, she was.
Um,
And she brags on that, by the way, Jim. She brags on that. So what's next for you, Jim?
Man, I just keep doing what I'm doing. I love what I do. I go out and speak occasionally. I do a little coaching here and there. I only take on 4 clients and have a waiting list, but I enjoy doing that, and I really enjoy speaking. And and then I'm writing a couple of new books for myself now. It'll be number 16 and 17, and we're on the 18th volume of Cracking the Rich Code. That the mastermind's a part of that as well. So yeah, it's keeps my life pretty full, and
Well,
just do whatever comes up that day. I don't set goals. I don't write things down. I don't have a vision board. I don't have any of that stuff. I just make decisions and move on it. And to me, all of that, if it works for somebody, I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying for me, um, it's mental gymnastics that I don't need. All I want to do is make a decision and go. If I decide I'm going to do something, I just get on with it, and finish it as fast as I can. Somebody says, "When's your next 2 books coming out?" I said, "I don't know when they come out. Whenever I finish them, and when I get down to really working on them, yeah, probably 30 days I can finish up a book if I really work on it." So, um, so I just kind of go with the flow a lot.
well, I'm going to work extra hard so that you take a look at me when I say, "Hey, Jim, I'd like to have your gymnastics, Gymnastics, turn into a box set. I want to do a box set of 20 or 2 box sets, 12 and 12, because I think that these are just wonderful in a box where you can just grab them and listen to them. And I just love every single project you've done. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, I love doing it. If somebody reads a chapter in there and it changes their life, and it helps the person that wrote the chapter, that's 2 people that got helped. But it's a lot more than that because that energy is going to reach other people that there's no way we could touch.
Well, I want to share a distinction that maybe is not coming off clear enough in this show is that you may do compilation books and you might be having the best people do those compilation books. But what you do that's the magic is you have the tribe support the leader who is the author who is doing the book. And that means it's just a perpetual force of success. If you do,
Mm-hmm.
if you do a compilation book, but there's no mastermind, it gets empty pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you figured
Yeah.
out the magic sauce is that someone that's in the first book all the way to the 16th book can all talk together and they all are enriched because your tribe is just growing to be cerebral and heart centered to support each other.
And it's so empowering. I mean, it happened the first book. 30 days later, I decided to do a Zoom, invited everybody on, said we're going to spend 90 minutes and and tell who you are, what you do, what you're looking for next, and if you got any issues you're dealing with, feel free to throw them out. And it's like they started right away helping each other.
Right.
I mean, it was amazing to watch. And but what I wanted to do was create a family of like-minded professionals that would be open to helping each other and even passionate about it. And you come on our masterminds, as you've seen, people are passionate about helping each other. I mean, somebody comes up with an issue they're dealing with, man, there's a whole bunch of people jumping right on that to help them. So it's great to see. It really is. We have some amazing people.
Yeah. And I think you got the magic sauce, which is once a month. You have,
Yeah.
if you do once a week, the implementation process is, let's just say it's a little stressful to make it happen. But when you have a whole month, you can really carry the conversation, carry the action through, and actually say, I'm ready for the next one now. So,
Yeah.
bravo to you, sir. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience that maybe I didn't ask that is part of your passion or what you're doing in life?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you a story about how to create passion.
I'd like to hear it.
And this happened about shortly after I learned about this power of letting go, probably close to 35 years ago. And a friend of mine and I used to read the same books, or some of the same books, not always. And we'd call each other and kind of go through the books and kind of learn from each other. What'd you get from it? And he called me one day and we were reading a little book called The Impersonal Life, which is a pretty amazing book. If you pick it up, it's written from you to you, and there's no author.
Hmm.
Anyway, he was stuck on a page and he called me up and he said, would you pick up the book and go to page whatever it was, 88 or something, and read it real quick and let's discuss. So I did. And we spent about an hour talking about this one page in the book. And at the end of it, he says, hey, let me ask you a question, Jim. He said, what do you think the word resourceful means? And I said, man, I don't know. I said, maybe being more productive or using your imagination or, I don't know, never thought about it. I said, why? He said, well, it's just an interesting word. And I said, yeah, I guess so. That was it. So we hung up. And later that day, I was driving home and I couldn't quit thinking about the word. It just kept ringing in my head. What does that mean? What does that mean? And of course, we didn't have the internet 35 years ago. So I went and picked up the dictionary, looked it up, and it was defined as once again full of source. And I thought, well, that could be pretty powerful depending on what you think source is.
Hmm.
And I had looked up the word source with the keyword in resourceful. And it was defined as where all things originate, not some things, but all things. I went, wow, that is even more powerful depending on what you think source is. And the next day, I was going to the bookstore to pick up some books I'd ordered. And I said, do you have a book with the origin of words? So I looked through one, couldn't even find the word source. I looked in another dictionary, had the same definition. Another dictionary had the same definition. And I kind of got a little bit obsessed with it. Every time I got a chance, I would go look it up, try to find it, but I couldn't find it. And I was probably a year and a half into it. I was over in the UK in a little town called Chester, little village. And I'm on a break for a couple of hours during a 2 day session I'm doing. And I'm walking down the sidewalk and I see the back of a building, and on the back door it said antique books. I thought, That's cool. I love old books. And they certainly have older books there than we do in the US.
Mhm.
So I wandered in the back door. And the first book I see is a dictionary. It looked like it was about maybe not quite a foot thick, but pretty close. It was all tattered on the edges and stuff. And it had a sign on that said, "Do not open." And I wrestled with it in my head for a minute. And I thought, that's probably for people in the UK. So I'll go ahead and open it. And I carefully did it. And I guess I was prepared to buy it if I tore it or something, but I guess I don't know what the price was, but I opened it up and I carefully turned the pages to the S's and I looked up the word source. And I saw some of the same things that I'd seen before. And suddenly there was one definition that popped out. It said source, love. And I went, wow, resourceful is once again full of love,
Mm,
where all things originate.
mm,
I walked on for a while and I thought, how do you apply that to your life? And after about 15, 20 minutes, I'm going, oh, when you decide you're going to do something and nothing less than that will do, you actually fall in love with it. And when you fall in love with it, it creates the passion to continue to move forward. And that could be something simple. It could be something major. It could be a new car you're going to buy, or a project you're going to accomplish, or a trip you're going to take, or whatever. But you fall in love with it, where all things originate. Walked on thinking about that. And I thought, man, I can't wait to share this with the group. And then suddenly it hit me. I thought, wait a minute. If all things originate in love, where does fear come from? And I thought, that's a flaw. Walked on about another 10 minutes. Then it hit me. I said, oh, I get it. We fall in love with fear.
mm,
We create the vision of what we want to accomplish. And based on our programming from that core belief that we have, we create a fear that keeps us from getting it.
mm.
That's why people address things that they want to accomplish in life, but don't follow through, because they create a fear that gets in the way of them accomplishing it. They fall out of love or fall in love with the fear. Wow, that is powerful when you think about it.
Very powerful.
Then I left there the next morning and I flew to Toronto for another event and happened to be with the guy that we read the same books. So we're out during a break for about 2 hours. We're walking down Yonge Street there in Toronto, and we walked out quite a ways. And suddenly we thought, hey, we're running a little late here. We better get back. So we're walking pretty fast. I'm 6'4". I take big steps, and he's about 6'2". Same thing. We occasionally had to stop for a red light or something or traffic, but we're hoofing it pretty fast. And suddenly, I feel this presence over my shoulder. And it's this guy walking in step with me. Literally, I could smell him. I could look forward and see him. That's how close he was. And I was just about to turn around and say, hey, buddy, back off a little bit. You might trip me here or something. And just as I started to turn around, he starts talking. And he's making statements, asking questions, and answering them himself with a different voice. So it's like two personalities. And his first thing he said, and God created man. And the other voice says, I know that. He said, yeah, but then God created woman. He said, yeah, I know that too. He said, yeah, but then God created fruit. And the other voice says, fruit? What does fruit have to do with anything? He said, well, inside the fruit, there's a seed. And he said, if you plant it, it will grow. And if you don't, it won't. And he turned and went the other direction. And I kept thinking about that. And I thought, when you fall in love with something, you plant a seed. And what do you do with that seed? It's just like the emotional trash that we get in our heads sometimes. We have to learn to pluck that out. We have to learn to let go. If you put a seed in a garden to grow, what's going to grow in addition to that garden? Weeds, right? They're automatic. They just grow. So you've got to be handy pulling out the weeds to keep your garden growing and keep that seed nourished to where it can grow to maturity and you'll have fruit or vegetables or whatever it is. It always reminded me of a story Jim Rohn used to tell. And he said the guy was walking down the street. He sees this guy over here with this beautiful garden. And he walks over and he said, "Wow." He said, "You and God have such a beautiful garden here." And he goes, "Yeah, well, you should have seen it when God had it by himself."
That's right.
So it takes it takes two, you know. People say, "Well, God put me in this position." I said, "No, that's not true. You made the decision to get in that position." And they said, "Well, I want to do what my purpose is in life." I said, "Well, your purpose is what you're doing right now." "No, I don't like being broke." I said, "Well, that's your purpose until you decide you don't like being broke enough that you're going to do something about it." I said, "But God will support you in your decision of being broke, or will support you if you decide to live in prosperity." So anyway, those two experiences kind of changed the way I look at things. You make a decision and you fall in love with it, as long as it's a firm decision that nothing less than that will do. And when you make a decision, you take action. When you take action, you're going to come face to face with some adversity sometimes. You're going to face with obstacles that get in your way. But if you're strong in your decision, you'll learn how to go over those or under those or around those or let go of those things. Most of them are created up here anyway. And so when I say there's power in letting go, when you're confronted with your comfort zone and you're trying to step out of it and it feels uncomfortable, the power is behind that. The power is when you let go and move forward and continue. Was it uncomfortable for me to talk to 3,650 people in a year and make one sale? People ask me today how I handle rejection. I'm going, I did that 3,650 times. I don't need to do it anymore. You know, what do you do when you get down? I said, I've been so far down and I found out there's nothing down there. So why go back? You know, it's just, it's a, it's a mindset is really what it is. Um, so anyway, we're all here on a mission of some kind. We set examples every day, um, some as an inspiration for people to follow, some as a warning of what not to do.
That was the best part of the show, Jim. And you got me thinking. And I'll just say this: the show could go a lot longer if I posed a couple questions. So, with your permission, I'd like to ask you a question
Absolutely.
another day,
Sure.
and because
We still have time. We have some
okay.
time.
Well, okay. I saw this show called Adolescence, and it's about a kid who he stabs a girl 7 times, and it's in the UK. And the father says to the son, "Did you do it?" And he says, "No, I didn't do it." And he says, "You promise?" And the son says, "I promise." Well, the police have video cam of the boy doing this, and the boy is crushed because he did actually do it. And the dad starts questioning himself and says, "My dad beat the heck out of me, and I swore I'd never beat my son, and I did all these things for my son. I gave him everything he ever wanted, and I loved him and I believed him." And he was so crushed when he found out the videotapes were shown, and he started questioning what he could have done better. And he becomes a bit of a monster in a couple spots because he gets his van painted that he's a bad person, all this stuff, and the family's ostracized from the community. And it's a very tough four episode series to watch. But I'm listening to your resourcefulness, and what I got from it was that his source was love for his son. His source was his love for being a father, and that was wrecked, and he couldn't resource himself, so he wasn't himself anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to find himself. And I think the point of this tangent is that when you can't resource, you have to find source again.
Most important to find source within you. And, we don't, love doesn't exist within us. We exist within love.
Right.
But we just make up stuff that keeps us from experiencing it. So, you know, forgiving is, if you just listen to the word forgiving,
Mm-hmm.
when you let go, you have the capacity to love. When you're hanging on to some hate for something, you have nothing to give
Right.
until you get rid of that hate. Then love shows up and you can give. Um, yeah, it's tough things to go through sometimes in life. But the most important thing is loving yourself.
It is. There's one part I'm leaving out that's important because it's almost the very finality of the fourth episode. Is the daughter says, "We're not leaving here because we deserve to be here and we're a family and we'd be here for Jamie." And the mom and dad look and say, "We made her." Like they're proud of what they made, and they were in question about what they could have possibly done. But the boy was bullied, cyberbullied, and all stuff. So he just made a bad decision, really bad decision.
Mhm.
But I love your perspective, and it is it is a trap we fall into when we don't let love be part of our inner core to operate. And when we do have that, we are bountifully rewarded with all the things that God wants us to have when we exude love. And that's why that's why when I handed this to you many years ago and I had you hold it, I actually said, "You exude love." I mean, when I hand a card to someone, it's not to hold my card, it's to actually honor them, that they bring smiles to the world. And I think a smile's one of the best exemplifying examples of what it is to be a cause for people's happiness and their joy and their humanity.
You walk into a supermarket and you see a young child in a basket and they look up at you and have this big smile on their face. What if everybody was like that? I mean, what some people are going through really, really tough times
Yeah.
and you don't know it. And what if you just smiled at that person and said hello? That might change their whole life.
Do you
I
remember?
mean, I've had those type of things happen where I had one woman, she said she bought a 2 CD album of mine. And she said, I never listened to it. And she tracked me down and she said, I decided everything was going wrong in my life. I decided to kill myself. She said, I loaded the gun. I put it in the car. I didn't want to do it at home. I'm going to go out in the country someplace and just shoot myself. And she said, I put the gun in the car. I started driving. And she said, I looked over in the seat and there were those 2 CDs.
Mm.
And she said, I don't know why, but I picked one up and I put it in the CD player and started listening. And she said, within 15 minutes, it had changed my whole life, my whole perspective. She said, there's no way I could shoot myself. But if I hadn't done that, I had made the decision, I'm done with this and I'm going to shoot myself. And you just never know. I mean, what your words can do. Or, when I write books of my own, I try to put something on every page that's life enhancing, so that people don't read one page and just say, "Well, this book's not that great." I want something on there that's going to shake them a little bit, or at least make them think, or make them underline it, or something, because you never know where somebody is at some point in their life.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's people like Grandma Sparky that say you make a difference. And remember Charlie Tremendous Jones?
yeah, I knew him pretty well. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought you did. I thought I remember hearing that. Well, his daughter
yeah,
told the story that he would go down the street walking, and when he'd go walk by somebody, he'd say, "Thank you for smiling." And if they were smiling, they'd say, "You're welcome." And if they weren't smiling, they'd start smiling.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was that way. I remember I first met him in an event in Las Vegas, and he was just all smiles and a big hug. And I'd never met him, and he just gave me a great big hug, and he said, "Thanks for the smile," or something to that effect.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
Well, I have five parting questions that I believe that when people hear a show and they say, "I want to be more like Jim," the secret sauce is the programming. So these are five questions that kind of will give people a hint of what they can do to not only be a little like you, but also have more joy in their life. So here we go.
yeah.
What book changed your life?
What book? Three Magic Words
As
by
you,
U.S. Anderson.
excellent. What movie inspires you?
Mhm. Well, that's a tough question. What movie inspired me?
Because you're
Maybe
the,
Rocky.
Rocky
Isn't
is
it?
the number one. If you Google, not Rocky is the number one most inspirational movie.
Yeah.
And since you've been
Well,
trying to give me all this wonderful wisdom, would you like to know what number two is?
yes.
Rudy. Do you want to know what number three is? I'm only going to do three.
Okay.
Hoosiers. Now, Rudy told me why they were in that order, one, two, and three. And this is my thank you to you and your wisdom. He said, There is more challenges per minute in Rocky than there are challenges per minute in Rudy than there are challenges per minute in Hoosiers.
Oh, wow.
That's why
Well, very cool.
and
Yeah.
that's why they called Rudy the Rocky of the 80s, because
Oh,
Rocky
yeah. Yeah.
70s.
Yeah. I
So
remember the book. I mean, the movie. Yeah.
so
Awesome.
number three, what song gets you going? What song do you love?
Um, Imagine by John Lennon.
That's one of the best ever for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, who's someone that's either your hero or someone you want to meet, or you can answer both?
Um, Hero. I'd like to meet Elon Musk, actually.
It's
Um,
2 days in a row. All right.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's who you'd like to meet. Is there a hero you'd like to talk about? Say
Hero. Well, Superman is actually my hero, but I can't think of a hero that I want to meet, somebody that really stands out. Well, I wouldn't mind meeting Donald Trump as well.
all right, good. And the
He's a hero.
fifth and final question for you, sir. What quote do you live by?
Code
Quote, quote.
quote. One that I wrote many years ago. When you do what you do with love, you'll eventually have only what you love in your life.
That is beautiful. And thank you very much, Jim. Again, people can go to your website, jimbritt.com, right?
JimBritt.com.
Glad no one else owns that. All right.
Oh,
Well, Jim, it's a pleasure having you on the Dr. Smiley Show. You certainly exemplify what it is to bring positivity and joy to the world. And I thank you for your time.
thanks so much. I appreciate it.